Open the Port Commission Tuesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patty's.
We opened the public meeting at 1 and we recessed right away for executive session. In executive session, we talked about real estate and a legal issue. We'll now close that executive session and reconvene the open public meeting. First item on the agenda is a roll call. Let the record show that all three commissioners are present. One of them with a St. Patrick's Day shirt on and the other with a button and one with nothing.
Yeah, you betcha.
We're going to pinch him.
The first item is the public comment period. And we have one person, Lori Province.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I salute Commissioner Jorgensen. Full disclosure, maiden name Knudsen. So I'm sure that the Irish among you have some Norwegian among you, or maybe some Danish. This is my green. Luckily, I found something in my purse. I am Lori Province, 2501 West Street, Bellingham, Washington. And I'm just rising today to talk a little bit about and comment on the agenda items today. And thank you very much for having embedded agenda items online so that the documents are all there and easily available. I know the last time I was here, I was talking about the website and the availability to the citizenry of the material. I appreciate that so much. One of the statements that was made several times in some of the contract extensions that you'll be looking at today was the 2014 real estate objective, which was to maintain, update, keep good care of the port's infrastructure. And so that was referenced a couple of times in the documents, the background documents for today's agenda, but I couldn't find a record of the 2014 real estate objective. So because I wanted to look for that, because I did not see that quoted in the permit background material that took the barge deck out of the waterway for the cleanup. So I just wanted to have an opportunity to say that I'm going to continue to work through and look as a good citizen should, and I'll be going ahead and hopefully be able to get some assistance from staff. I try not to bother staff, but I do want to be able to see some of the underlying documents so I can follow along the business as an informed citizen should. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you very much, Lori. We only had one person sign up. Is there anyone that came in late that didn't get a chance to sign up that wants to speak? Very good. Seeing no one. Oh.
Thank you. Members of the Port Commission, my name is Matt Petrini. I am the Clean Energy Program Manager at Resources for Sustainable Communities. We're a local environmental nonprofit that's been working on waterfront redevelopment and associated cleanup issues since about 1999. So I'm here to speak to that. Briefly, I wanted to encourage you guys to continue to look for strong standards of cleanup in the waterfront planning that moves forward. This especially relates to the Georgia Pacific West site, but also to the other cleanup sites that will be before you in the next couple years. A strong cleanup standard is really important for a lot of reasons. It helps make sure that the health and safety of our community is preserved. It helps preserve the fishing industry by providing good habitat for fish to be able to spawn and to be able to develop our fishery. And on top of that, doing good cleanup creates jobs. It creates jobs employing people, and it also creates more certainty for potential tenants moving in who might be concerned about the level of cleanup. So we want to be able to have the full number of options when it comes to tenants moving in, and we want them to be assured that the cleanup level that they're going to be working with down there is something that would be the same as any other site site that they're considering, like a greenfield site somewhere else. So it's really important in terms of being able to attract the best tenants and the tenants that want to put the most people to work to be able to have a strong cleanup standard there. So I was going to encourage you to do that, and that's something we'll be watching closely as this process continues, especially as we're negotiating with a master developer and trying to determine what to do at the waterfront moving forward. I also want to encourage you to think seriously about seeking tenants that are interested in doing clean energy development at the waterfront, or possibly doing development that involves using the cogeneration site that we have down there. Both of these things are huge opportunities for our community. We're already creating a lot of good jobs in clean energy here in our community, and we can continue to do that. I think the waterfront site could be critical to that. So I hope you'll look at those things, and thanks a lot for taking the time to listen to me today.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that we missed? Okay, seeing no one, we will move to the consent agenda. And the consent agenda will be put up on the board, all 9 items.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through I.
Gentlemen, you've had a chance to read over the consent agenda. Do either of you have any comments?
No.
I have one on consent agenda item G, is a modification of a lease of Hilton Harbor and Bitter End Boat Works, Hilton Harbor to a new tenant. And I see that tenant is in the audience. Welcome, Jesse Van Golden. Is there anything you wanted to say other than?
I'm looking forward to working with the port for a long time, I hope. And so far, the experience has been good. Had a lot of good help from Brady. I saw him somewhere back there. Thanks for all that. And looking forward to it.
Good.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, welcome aboard. And I toured your facility, and you're doing a good job down there. It's great to have you as a tenant. So no other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. The next item is our presentations. First presentation will be an update on our Working Waterfront Coalition.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Shirley McFerrin, Director of Real Estate. It is my pleasure today to introduce to you the Working Waterfront Coalition of Whatcom County. The Working Waterfront Coalition's mission is to promote the vitality and economic benefits of our working waterfront for the people of Whatcom County. I have had the pleasure, along with other staff, of working with the Executive Committee in several meetings and on several occasions, and I will tell you that they are very positive, they're energetic, and they are inspiring. And the port staff intends to work with them in a cooperative, positive manner. We have with us today from the Executive Committee, and when I mention their name, if they could raise their hand or stand up, I'd appreciate it. The first is Jim Kyle. He is the president of the coalition. Welcome, Jim. Long-term port tenant Jay Bornstein, vice president. And Lang Solberg, treasurer. Debbie Granger, is she here? No, okay. And Dave Hansen, at-large position. He's not here, okay. I thought it would be fun for the coalition to come and share their ideas, their goals and objectives with the Port Commission. They have about a 10-minute presentation. They have about 10 or 11 slides. And we're going to start with Jim Kyle, the president. So thank you.
Thank you, Shirley.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Shirley, and for inviting us here. And thank you, commissioners, for taking the time to hear us talk about our organization for a few minutes. Shirley read, well, as you can see on the screen, we're formally the Working Waterfront Coalition of Whatcom County, and our logo is an anchor. Maritime industries have been well anchored in this county for over a century, as you know. That old anchor is still buried in the mud, and our mission is to replace the rusty old cable with stainless steel chain. Shirley read the mission already, and that puts what I just said about the anchor in a less picturesque way. Of course, when businesses band together, they do so to some extent in their own self-interest. We want our members to thrive. But the last 6 words for the people of Whatcom County give the statement added meaning. Citizens do, after all, own the Port of Bellingham, and they deserve to retain the benefits that flow from strong maritime industries. These specific goals guide us toward fulfilling this mission. We communicate with one voice to improve understanding and because there is strength in numbers. We educate the community because we need citizens to be both participants and stewards. We share ideas because every member's success strengthens the maritime cluster. Jay will address claiming a place at the table. We promote a healthy shoreline because the sea is a source of our livelihoods. We respect tribal environmental policies, and in fact, a Lummi Nation member sits on our board. We have a membership of 90 maritime businesses, all based in the county. We also have an associate membership level that is open to all county-based businesses. And here's our board of directors. You can see that each of the 6 maritime sectors has a dedicated seat on our board. I've been asked several times if the coalition is a commercial fishing organization. The answer is no. As you can see on this chart, both the commercial fishing and seafood processing sectors are allocated one dedicated board seat each. Our board, like our membership, is a diverse group of individuals and both large and small companies that includes all political persuasions and provides many different kinds of products and services. However, we have joined together to promote the vitality and economic benefits of our working waterfronts. And here is the mission statement again, one more time. This time with both Coalition and Port of Bellingham logos symbolizing a partnership. A sample of 2015 port objectives includes expansion of marine trades, development of the shipping terminal, restoration of infrastructure, improvements at C Street Terminal, redevelopment of the Blaine Marina Industrial Area, among others. The coalition is on the same page here, and we think we can help. At times, we may disagree about what is best or what is possible for local maritime businesses. If that happens, we will be your conscience. But the overriding intent of the Working Waterfront Coalition is to partner with the Port of Bellingham in promoting the vitality and economic benefits of our working waterfronts for the people of Whatcom County. That's the last time I'll read that. So how will this partnership work? Here are 2 examples. First, Jay Bornstein will address a plan for the coalition to serve as a liaison during the forthcoming Blaine Marina Industrial Area project. Second, Lang Solberg will discuss a recently published study putting numbers to the economic impact of the port-based fishing fleet and seafood processing sector. In this example, with the help of the Commercial Fishermen's Association, the coalition's partnership with the port has already borne fruit. So I'll turn this over to Jay.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Well. Good afternoon, Port Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to give our little spiel. I call your attention to our number 5 goal, which was the claim a place at for the maritime industry at a table for planning and development. Now, this goes to the point of being proactive and a participant rather than being a responder or a critical responder, as you often get. So instead of being behind the curve, we want to be a participant in front of the curve and be very helpful at that. We recognize, though, that having a place at the table is an earned position, and that not just that we deserve a ride at the tables for merely stepping up. We need to earn that respect, and we need to earn our place at the table. To this end, as we engage in the Blaine project, we've taken a very direct approach. The executive committee met with Shirley McFerrin and Brady Scott at first to introduce ourselves and get the project started. From there, we met with an extended port staff to learn about how, and an extended executive committee and a few board members to learn about how the port works and how we could then supplement and help the port. The third thing we're now on that one item of getting the Blaine project going is this presentation, so that you, the port commissioners and the public now can get a better understanding of how the Working Waterfront Coalition works. Right after this, we have organized a Blaine Stakeholders Committee to get together so that we can start having that committee become formalized. We're going to meet again on Friday with the couple of port staff to talk about how that Stakeholders Committee can interface. Then we will organize an initial informal meeting with the port staff and the committee itself, the Blaine Committee. From there, issues will be on the table. You'll be starting to move forward, and the Waterfront Coalition will act as the liaison of tutoring and helping the Port Blaine Committee and any of the staff here. So that is how we are planning to integrate this Blaine project and how it will format other projects in the future about how we would act as a stakeholder at the table. That concludes my presentation about that. Now Lang Solberg will introduce the economic study.
Thank you, Jay.
Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. My name is Lang Solberg. I work down the street at LFS Incorporated, and I serve on the board of directors on the Marine Retail and Chandleries seat. Just a quick note on the revised commercial fishing economic impact study. Start off by thanking from the bottom of our hearts the Port of Bellingham, Commission and staff for providing the financial support and the personnel support for the revised study, which included figures specific to our local commercial fishing industry and seafood processing sector. We really appreciate the effort that was put forth, and we welcome the opportunity to work with both the Commercial Fishermen's Association as well as Dodd Snodgrass in particular, who helped get this important work done. One of the biggest takeaways from the revised study is the fact that the commercial fishing and seafood processing industries support a similar quantity of jobs to that of Western Washington University and the St. Joseph Hospital complex. It's also important to remember that this study represents jobs based on port property in commercial fishing and seafood processing sectors and does not encompass the entire marine cluster county-wide. We are pursuing aggregate marine cluster numbers in conjunction with the Commercial Fishermen's Association. My final note is simply that we look forward to staying abreast of comprehensive future economic impact studies similar to those done for the Port of Seattle by the same consultant, which include these industry impact numbers the first time around. We encourage commissioners and staff to keep these new numbers close at hand while moving forward with decision making. And with that, I thank you very much for your support, and the coalition thanks you for your support. If there are any questions, we're open to that, and I'm sure I can defer to Jim and Jay if I can't answer something, so.
Question, maybe meant for Jim, I'm not sure. Really just incredibly proud of you folks being together on a committee and looking at all of the avenues of commercial fishing as well as sailing and all of the types of boating that go on. The thing I don't see, unless I'm not looking at the right names, I don't see a sport fisherman on your a salmon sport fishermen on your committee. And I think that the number of sport fishermen is really grown, and I think it would be something you might consider having as a member.
Thank you for that suggestion. Is that a question? Or, well, at this point, the Board of Directors does not include any recreational representation. And so that's something that's something we're thinking about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wayne.
Can I, before you leave, Jim, I'd like to say that I really appreciate the folks that are stepping up, like when the commercial fishermen got together and now the Working Waterfront Coalition. I've looked at folks like you as the experts in their fields, and experts don't always have college degrees, although a lot of you do. But you do certainly know more about what's happening on a day-to-day basis than I think any of us could. So your inputs are incredibly valuable, and I'm really looking forward to what the future holds with this group and your help in getting us a better understanding of how our working waterfronts actually work on a day-to-day basis. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the MDA, or Master Development Agreement for the Waterfront District.
Yeah, I'm going to fill in a second. Thank you. Too much tea.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I've reported back to you a couple times on the progress that we've made with Harcourt. I'm pleased today that we're going to offer an agreement up for you. I don't believe the agreement is final. I'll get into some more details as we go along, but it's probably as close to final as it's going to get for until it is final, if that makes any sense.
It's fine until it's
In
fine.
front of you is a timeline of how this project came about. The port signed an agreement with Georgia Pacific in early 2005. I believe it was the very first commission meeting of Commissioner Jim Jorgensen. So welcome to the commission in 2005 to sign a big agreement. The port had obviously been working, doing some due diligence with Georgia Pacific prior to that, several years. After that agreement was signed, we established the Waterfront Futures Group and then followed on with the Waterfront Advisory Group. These were our public process groups that provided public input. We did some SEPA review. We studied alternatives. We drafted plans. In the end, we ended up with a master plan document that changed the zoning of the site. And thanks to the foresight of this commission and of the city council, that document was passed in 2013, December of 2013. And that gave us the zoning that is in place today. We consider the site to be 5 unique sites. One is our marine trades area up there in the top in the purple, and you just heard from the Working Waterfront Coalition. The port is committed to retaining that purple area as a marine trades area, and we have a lot of scheduled improvements, capital and operational, coming in the next year for that area. On the bottom, there's an orange area, and that's called Cornwall Beach. That area used to be owned 51% by the port, 49% by the city. The port does marine trades areas pretty well, and the city does parks very well. And since Cornwall Beach was to become a park, we entered into an agreement where we swapped our share of Cornwall Beach for some land in the purple marine trades area that the city owned. The trade made sense because, as I said, that's what we do. We do marine trades areas. You go to the middle of the site, you'll see a green section and a yellow section. That's our shipping terminal, and that's the log pond area. Our shipping terminal has often been called the most underutilized asset in Whatcom County, and we're hopeful and confident that because we're combining it with the Yellow Log Pond area, that we have enough critical mass now in that area to attract a light industrial user that will provide both working family wage jobs and also utilize the shipping terminal and provide some work there. And then the blue area of the site is the area of the site that we're going to talk about today. It's called the downtown waterfront area. It's got two different sets of zoning. One's commercial mixed use, which is what the subject of the master development agreement is. And then it also has an institutional use on that area, which is slated to become owned by Western Crossing, which is a joint venture between the port and Western Washington University. The blue area is 37 acres. It's important to note that the MDA is not for that full 37 acres. Again, Western's 6 acres is in that site. In addition, there's some other properties, mostly on, I guess, what would be the east side of the railroad tracks, is also included in that site, but in the blue area, but not in the MDA. The port initial request for proposals went out in June of 2013, and we received 7 responses to that proposal. We established an evaluation committee to evaluate those proposals. I should say that only 4 of those 7 were for a master developer. The other 3 were for one-off projects. So we established a committee. It was a multi-agency committee to evaluate those 4 proposals, and that committee consisted of the city, the port, Western Washington University, Whatcom County, and then our consultants from Heartland, one of which is here today and is going to speak in a little bit, Matt Anderson. The unanimous recommendation of that committee evaluating these proposals was to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with Harcourt Developments out of Ireland. That ENA was actually entered into in March of 2014, so it was March 4th, so a little over a year ago, we entered into that negotiating agreement. The next year consisted of a number of negotiations, along with due diligence of the port on Harcourt. Part of our due diligence package consisted of looking at financial statements, determining if they had the wherewithal to see this project through. We did some physical due diligence, toured their corporate offices, toured a development called Park West in Dublin, toured the Titanic Quarter in Belfast, and toured Liverpool. They have a small development there called the hotel called the Titanic Hotel, and then they also have some future developments that are just getting started there that will consist of a number of apartment buildings. We did some legal due diligence that Frank's going to speak to later. And then we checked references in each of those locations that I mentioned earlier. We talked to public officials or development partners that Harcourt worked with to get an idea of what kind of a partner they were. I think it's important to note that the Harcourt's vision for the site, which is sketched in front of you there, is largely consistent with the master plan documents. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be amendments or there won't be changes. There likely will. But those changes and amendments would have to go through a rigorous public process to be implemented. Again, it's a vision. It's not final, but it is pretty consistent with the master plan, and it is typical of what we expect we'll see at the end.
Hey, Rob?
Yes, sir.
So if you don't mind, we might just jump in.
Yeah, please do, anytime.
So this is sort of where they are today. We don't know what those individual buildings are going to be. If they ask to change that and the Port Commission is amenable to adjustments to what we're seeing on this screen, what would their process be? Would the Commission make a suggestion to the city? I guess it'd be the City Council because these would be revisions through there.
Yeah, so the port will approve this on a project-by-project basis. So the Port Commission will have a chance to approve or to change or to amend anything they propose prior to approving a sale of any parcel of land to Harcourt. If Harcourt wants to vary from the master plan, it'll be up to Harcourt to appeal to the city for any of those amendments. So that'll be Harcourt's process to undergo with the city. Of course, the port, I think, will weigh in on that process, but your shot for changing that will be before we actually sell sell any single parcel of land to Harcourt.
All right. So I guess it's sort of a process question, but it's also, I think, another level of assurance to the public that these, any changes that would be suggested obviously have to go through a pretty rigorous process.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's a fair statement.
And it would be fair to say the granary building is probably first on the list.
Yeah, I believe that'll be the first project they undertake. In fact, the development schedule specifically talks about this, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but that specifically talks about the granary building. Okay. The master development area, I have a map up there in front of you of that. You can kind of see let me just point that out here. So this area right in here that's kind of in pink. Uh-oh, thank you. I practiced this earlier and I still didn't get it right.
There it is.
Okay, so that area that I circled in the pink is the master development area. It's a little under 19 acres. It's 18.8 acres. We started off with an RFP for 10 acres. Harcourt wanted a little more property to give them critical mass. We ended up talking about two-phase development with two 10-acre parcels. After further negotiations, we determined it really wasn't in anyone's best interest to have two 10-acre parcels, that it was just much easier to put this into a 18.8-acre parcel and have it be one phase. So that's how we ended up at 19. You'll see the blue area kind of right below the area I circled, the 6-acre rectangle. That is reserved for Western or Western crossings. And that area is not included in this agreement. It's not included in the master development agreement. However, there's nothing to preclude Harcourt and Western from entering into an agreement to develop that area. So Harcourt could, in fact, go from the 19 acres that we are entering an agreement with them for to 25 acres if they end up successfully negotiating a deal with Western Crossing.
Rob, before you get off that, I think it's important to, as a point of reference, Barclay, when it's been developed over the past 30 years, in the first 20 acres, which was from the Dorothy Hagen building down to Hagen's grocery store, roughly 20 acres, took over 20 years. So you're kind of a rule of thumb looking at maybe an acre a year in development. So I know a lot of the citizens of this community are concerned that this brownfield has been brown for 10 years, and boy, we're going to have a lot of changes. Just realize about an acre a year is a rough number. Now, Harcourt can do it faster than that if there's people who want to come to the waterfront, but most likely we don't want to get our hopes too high, but keep a reference of what 20 acres really is.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's an excellent point. So we consider this to be a public-private partnership, although it may not fit the legal definition of that, and the documents certainly aren't structured in that legal definition, but we do have a number of public entities involved here, including the port, whose responsibilities will be the environmental cleanup. The city has some responsibilities here in both utilities and the installation of arterial streets and parks. And then Harcourt has responsibilities to build the buildings, to do any roads that are not arterial, and to install any open spaces that are not parks. And of course, we have Western Crossing, which is Western Washington University, involved in the site as well. Proposed master development agreement, Harcourt Washington LLC. This is a single purpose entity formed to undertake this project. So I think that's really important to note. This is not the Harcourt corporate entity in Dublin. They would, of course, form a U.S. or Washington entity. Highly qualified, experienced project managers, key person transfer restrictions. We got there because we think it's one of the reasons we selected Harcourt was for their experience. They've got a number of personnel that have done projects like ours all around the world, and we wanted them intimately involved in this project. They do have an exclusive right to develop the 19 acres. There's a schedule that we're going to go over here in a little bit. The schedule, I think it's important to know that it is a default schedule in that if they don't meet the timeline, they're in default. So it's kind of the outside edge of the schedule. It's the maximum amount of time they can take to develop any given piece before they're in default. The market or market conditions will actually determine or dictate the pace of the development.
Hang on, Rob. Sir. You mentioned the key person transfer restrictions. Can you go into a little more detail on that one?
There's a couple individuals in Harcourt that we want involved in this project. Frank, do you want to speak to this point, or?
Sure.
Sure, Commissioners. There are a couple individuals that port staff identified are critical to the program, and they have to control and be the majority owners of the LLC through the construction of the first two projects, and I think Rob will speak to that. And after that, which actually takes about 5 years, then the thought was the project will have enough momentum, be successful that we can loosen up those restrictions.
Okay, to the schedule. Again, this is a default scenario. We expect Harcourt will develop the granary building and be completed with that development by 2019. Second building by 2021, third building by 2024, and so on. Throw out a couple of numbers here. Commissioner Robinson alluded to this earlier. The Barclay development, which we believe is somewhere around 700,000 square feet today, is taking 20 years to develop. The Bellwether development right next door here on the waterfront took 30 years, and it's 275,000 square feet. So you're not going to see an urban village pop up there overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to go building by building, and ultimately what will drive the pace of the development will be market demand. It won't be our desires, it will be what the market desires. There are provisions to delay some of these things. Most of them are market condition delays. If we have another great recession like we did in 2008 where property values plummet and the demand isn't there, there's a 24-month delay that Harcourt can invoke. There's a couple other delays that are more based on third-party actions, such as the port not getting its actions under the consent decree completed or the city not getting roads installed. Harcourt can invoke delays on those as well because they're out of their control. But for the most part, that's the schedule you're looking at.
So the development schedule that we're seeing here, the granary building and whatever the second building is, those are locked into this agreement that we're talking about now.
Absolutely.
However, the third building, the 500,000 square feet, the 1 million square feet, those amounts and dates, they're not locked into this agreement. Is that true?
No, they're locked in. They just have less of a penalty if they don't meet them.
So they're more than just, these are more than, so that the third building by 2024, the other two there, those are not just goals, those are
hard dates.
Hard dates.
So Commissioner, on the first two buildings, the granary building and building 2, those are excluded from a claim that market conditions precluded their development according to the schedule. Under the theory that Harcourt agreed with, that they can see the market conditions now out far enough to commit to those two buildings. Beyond that, there's a schedule that allows up to a 2-year extension if market conditions change such that they cannot continue under the schedule. But the first two, they've judged the market conditions today to make that commitment.
So how the property transfers. Harcourt purchases any piece of land that they're going to develop. They're not going to purchase the whole 18.8 acres right from the beginning. They'll take the land down in chunks as they're ready to develop it. This was in the port's best interest so that we were not selling our land to a developer that was holding it and then speculating on its increase in price. We established a price of $20 per square foot. We think this is a fair value for the property. The goal of our property was to put it to productive use, to get jobs down on the site. We thought that was more important than maximizing the per acre value. However, I'm going to go through some the reasons we got to $20 a square foot, and we believe, again, that it is a fair price. That's today's value, or the value of the land at the date we signed the agreement. This increases at 3% per year. They have an option to lease at that same price times the port's return on investment, and they will pay us $200,000 for the granary building.
Rob, that's important to note on the $200,000 for the granary building. That's the only money that Harcourt's hard money they're going to put up to begin with. This lease negotiation has been going on for almost a year. And part of it is to try to protect the port if something goes haywire and they don't continue with their development for some reason, that there's reasons that we can get this back if need be. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But the next building after the granary building, they are going to have to put up some big money, but not right away, and it's an LLC and a Washington corporation. So that's the reason for this lengthy agreement.
And Commissioners, with regard to the granary building, if they don't build it according to the schedule, the port has a right to buy back the granary property for $10. And so it would make a profit of
$99,910. $990. Sorry.
Right, so it's essentially non-refundable on the granary building. And so that is a further incentive to keep moving according to the schedule.
They would essentially forfeit their $200,000.
Right.
Rob?
Yes, sir.
You say you're going to go into the appraisal on the land value?
Yeah.
Soon or right here?
Next slide.
Okay.
So this is how we got to the $20. We had a couple appraisals done, and they ranged in valuation depending on whether the land was clean or dirty or what it was being used for. We took into consideration that the city is obligated to install certain infrastructure that increases the value of the land. We took into consideration that there's a brownfield condition, there's geotechnical and seismic considerations, and that there's underground industrial infrastructure. Those all devalue the land. And then we took into considerations that the value to the citizens of Whatcom County is to get this put to work, to get jobs on the site, to get economic development going, and to increase our tax base.
Maybe, Mike, could you speak a little bit to the seismic situation for that property?
Sure, Commissioner. And again, my name is Mike Stoner. I'm the Environmental Director at the Port of Bellingham. These issues that Rob mentioned as factors that devalue the property, the brownfield condition, contamination, the seismic issues, and all the underground infrastructure is something that we really looked at in detail over the past 10 years as we were developing the approach for a master plan. This site is virtually all fill. It's different kinds of fill, including dredge materials, construction debris, all kinds of different things. It's fill that is on the waterfront in a seismically active area, which is typical of not only Puget Sound, but basically in the entire Pacific Rim. So there are engineering solutions to build in the waterfront. The bellwether structures are a really good example of engineering that is done in this kind of environment. There's rock pillar columns that are used to build foundations that are safe in the kind of seismic events that we expect to see here. But those cost money. So like Rob said, you know, that was one of the factors that went into the $20 a square foot purchase price.
Thank you.
So, Rob, on your last bullet there, I think this has come up in a previous conversation, of value to the citizens in Whatcom County. So $20 a square foot today, and putting it back to work was what you just said, putting it back to work now for the citizens, putting it back on the tax rolls essentially is what this would do, as opposed to sitting on it waiting for a higher value at some future point.
Absolutely. If we were in the land speculation business, we probably wouldn't be selling this today at $20 a foot. We'd be waiting for a higher value, and we'd probably get that value. But we'd also be looking at a bare piece of land that's not producing jobs and not contributing to our economy. Performance requirements. You saw a schedule I showed earlier that's a very brief synopsis of what we call Exhibit 4.1 in the Master Development Agreement, and that schedule will dictate the default scenarios if they were not to meet the timeline. Again, that's the default, not the minimum expectation. Right of first offer, should they go into one of those default scenarios where they're not developing at a pace where they are contractually required to do so, they go into what's called a right of first offer scenario. And that means that we can turn around and ask them if they want to buy the property at X price per foot. And if they say no, we can offer it to the market at X price per foot. So we have the ability to bring someone else into the development if Harcourt isn't performing. Again, there's some market condition delays. I talked about those earlier. And then there's provisions in place to ensure that we have a quality development. And most of that is guided by the master plan development regulations that were approved by the city and the Port Commission a little over a year ago. That's our assurance that we end up with a quality product at the end of the day. And then, Commission, as I said earlier, you have the ability to approve each project on a case-by-case basis as they come to you to purchase the land. With that, I'm going to ask Frank to jump into some legal considerations.
Commissioners, Frank Schmelik, the Port's General Counsel. I am the paid paranoid in the transaction. With the Harcourt attorneys drafted the document. So legal considerations, we try and identify business risk and alternatives. Business risk is for you, legal advice is for us, but we do try and identify business risk. We prepare the documents. We look at statutory and constitutional compliance. We identify and try and minimize legal risk as opposed to business risk. We try and identify and minimize potential for future disagreements. We perform what's called a transaction failure analysis, which simply says if everything goes bad, what happens next? And we perform some due diligence on Harcourt. And really, not only for ports, but any business, it's a risk-reward situation that you're looking at. So what did we do? Well, we analyzed the transaction, and throughout the year, we utilized the services of 2 other Seattle law firms to have separate sets of eyes and say, as this thing is forming, what do you think the legal issues are? What do you think the issues are? And one of those was this option issue became somewhat legally problematic. It didn't really do much for the port. It was a better document to just go to the 19 acres. We did look at the Las Vegas project called Sullivan Square. Sullivan Square was a big development that about $19 million that Harcourt was going to undertake in Las Vegas. Their timing was perfect. They wanted to start that development in late 2008, and the economy collapsed. They declined to start the project. Their local partners sued them. Everybody sued each other. I've talked to the lawyer. I've looked at the pleadings. At the end of the day, Harcourt ended up with the project, and I believe what happened is they paid the other side's attorney's fees, based on what I can see from looking at the documents. So I think one would say that they settled that. And in talking to the lawyer in Las Vegas, who's a real estate lawyer, he said, well, this wasn't the only one I had in this period of time in developments in Las Vegas. He said I had a lot of them, but these guys survived compared to most of them that did not survive the calamity. We also looked at, talked with your port staff, who does the business side of it, to look at document structure and minimize business risk to the port. So what are the business risks and alternatives? Well, Harcourt is a single-purpose LLC, and so you have to assume it has none or very little assets. I should say that's not unusual, okay? That is not unusual for big developers to form single-purpose entities for transactions. So a couple of things: key person transfer restrictions, keep these key people involved, and then termination without damages. Let me explain that. So somebody like a port is a property owner. What they always want to do is, if someone's not performing, their main interest is get off my property so I can get somebody else to perform. What's the other side do? Well, if you throw me off the property, I'm going to lose 10, 20, 30, 50, whatever I can claim, $1 million in damages. So now we're across the table, and there's some leverage on both sides. One side saying, well, there's damages, and the other side saying, well, there's my property. Harcourt, the local entity, in terms of assets, and let me say they're going to put money in to build projects and whatnot, but they recognize the fact that a single-purpose entity would be problematic to collect damages from, and that the port has money because it has a taxpayer. So we agree on no damages, which should limit that kind of dynamic if something goes wrong. I must add, Harcourt was great to deal with, but I am the paid paranoid, so I'm kind of painting a picture of everything that could go wrong. I'm a fun guy to hang around with, really, a lot of times. Okay, so the other thing that could happen in the United States that incidentally does not happen under what's called schemes of reorganization, as I understand it in Ireland, is Harcourt could declare bankruptcy. It's a well-traveled pathway from our largest airlines in the United States down to the littlest company. When you declare bankruptcy, there's what's called an automatic stay. A stay is an order from the bankruptcy judge, says don't do anything until I tell you differently. And typically it lasts a couple years while they try and sort through what to do. This is what happened to the Port of Everett, an automatic stay in place. So if they miss a deadline, then we have an automatic conversion of their exclusive right to develop the 9 acres to rights of first offer. And let me explain that. These terms are frequently confused, rights of first refusal and rights of first offer. A right of first offer occurs when you go to somebody like your neighbor, and I must say Commissioner McCauley used this example. You go to your neighbor and say, listen, before I sell my house, I'll offer it to you. So you go to your neighbor and say, you want to buy my house? No. Okay, I'm going to put it on the market and cut my best deal and move on. That's much easier to use economically than a right of first refusal, which would say to my neighbor, when I get a deal from whomever, I will bring it to you and let you decide if you'd like that deal. And so what happens when I'm out in the marketplace on a right of first refusal, I have to negotiate with them and say, oh, by the way, if we really negotiate hard and reach a deal, you can't take the deal until I offer it to a third party. So it limits the ability to market property, where rights of first offer really just say, do you want it at this price? The theory being here, commissioners, is that let's say that Harcourt says, well, it's market conditions, that's why we couldn't perform. And we say, we disagree. We think maybe you don't have the money or something else happened. We think we can do better. Then the port can go out and try and market it to keep the project moving forward. The port may choose to reduce the price, or the port may choose to increase the price. The port may choose to build a building on its own. Whatever, Harcourt's still involved, but the port can move forward. So that's what we did. The limit the rights to 19 acres. Harcourt is a big company. They would have liked to have taken everything they could get their hands on, because that's what developers do. But the port, under your direction, was quite adamant that the log pond area was reserved for a different zoning for light industrial uses, and therefore they couldn't do that. They interestingly had an issue. They said, well, what if you sell it to somebody and they rezone it to compete with us? That wouldn't be fair, because we're putting all this effort in and then you get somebody to compete with us. We said, if we do that, we'll offer it to you first. If we're going to rezone it, we'll let you get a hold of it first. So statutory.
Frank, I'm back on that other slide. It's really important to note when you said Harcourt could declare bankruptcy, that could be just the LLC in Washington.
It would be just the LLC in Washington.
And not the parent company.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to protect ourselves against.
And, you know, frankly, Harcourt wasn't aware. I feel, you know, they were like, well, you can do that? And we said, yeah, in the United States, you can easily declare bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy court takes over and ties up your property. So one of your business risk commissioners, they do declare bankruptcy, and this property is tied up for a couple of years. Okay, so that is a business risk. Statutory compliance, we considered SEPA, constitutional issues, port district statutes on surplusing and port comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. Other port statutes made sure we're in compliance with the law. And then we tried to identify and minimize potential future disagreements. First is a detailed agreement. I understand it's going to be put on the webpage. I find it fascinating. You all will probably find a single-spaced 43-page document equally interesting to read. But it is designed to essentially say that when you come forward with a project, the port will create a lot for you, because right now it's just a big piece of property. So Sylvia Goodwin's shop will create a lot with the city with a binding site plan process. Then you'll tell us the plans, Harcourt, for what you want to build on that. If it's consistent with everything, we'll approve that, and you have the financing. Then you'll build the building and go on to the next one and the next one. Then there's a schedule under which they have to comply with that's based on square footage that attempts to align to the city's square footage requirements to build infrastructure. So those things are moving along at the same pace. We do have special provisions, as you saw, for the granary building and for what we call the Building 2 project. There are then provisions on the environment. Keep in mind that when we go back here, the port has a consent decree from Department of Ecology to install a remedial action on the property. After that, as part of that consent decree, Ecology worked with us because we were going to do a development and appended to the consent decree a plan to manage anything that was dug out of the site when you're building a building. And that plan was approved by Ecology, and so we have a very bright line. We're responsible for our consent decree, which is of course subject to an ecology grant and our AIG insurance policy. The developer is responsible for anything they dig out of the hole. They can't call us back up and say, we found something dirty, come and get it. So we wanted to limit the port's ongoing environmental liability, which we did. We did form of agreements for future transactions. So there's some 18 or 20 exhibits here that have a form of a purchase and sale agreement, a form of a lease, a form of a deed, the environmental indemnity, a parking license, a construction license, a variety of things. Those are subject to change in the future, but the concept here is to get us all at least in the same ballpark so that when time comes to actually finalize a document, we're not starting really far apart. Termination without damages, and then we put in alternate dispute resolution, which is basically binding arbitration to solve disputes. So factors for your consideration now. I can answer any other questions. Factors for commission consideration is, I think, back to Rob.
Thank you, Frank. So yeah, before I get to the factors for commission consideration, we did a lot of work early on helping to identify the, first of all, helping to prepare the request for proposals, and then helping to identify who we would negotiate with was Heartland out of Seattle. And Matt Anderson is here from Heartland, and he'd like to address the commission very briefly.
Thank you, Rod. Commissioners, nice to see you again. Again, I'm Matt Anderson, one of the principals at Heartland. We've been working with the Port staff since late 2012 on this project. If Frank is the paid paranoid, it's our job to seek out ways to capture as much value as possible for a project. In this case, there's a couple of things to keep in mind as you're reviewing the draft agreement that are really, really important. We've seen these projects from the beginning. We've seen them when they're a mess in the middle of a recession and unraveled and put back together. And this agreement, I think, bar none, at least in the region, the ones that we've worked on, has every bell and whistle one could hope to integrate into an agreement, which is why it took a little bit longer than we had initially forecasted to getting it done. But really key to this is an overall alignment of interest between the parties. So both parties have to be kind of incented to move forward in the same direction to the same cause at the end of the day. And I think this agreement does that really well through all of the features that Rob and Frank have outlined. And then it also has to be sustainable over the long term. An agreement like this has to be flexible. So you'll see in the master development timeline, there's extension opportunities, some for specific reasons, some for general reasons. There's a lot of things that are very difficult to account for over a 20 or 30-year build out, and those are all built into this agreement. And it is a lowercase p partnership in our view, in the sense that there's going to be a lot of back and forth, but this agreement really does its best to, in one moment in time, anticipate all the different permutations that are likely to happen over time. One of the things that was a part of our job was to look at the value of the property. We underwrote it in 2012 prior to going out to the market. We had hundreds of conversations with local, regional, national, and even international developers as they looked at the RFP for the property, got a lot of feedback about everybody else's impressions of the market. Here, we did our own underwriting, financial modeling of the property with both known and unknown conditions, and then of course the two appraisals that Rob mentioned helped kind of articulate from an appraisal standpoint where those values come in. The magic after that really landed in crafting an agreement that addressed the unknown portions of this, and then allocated risk accordingly in that value. So that's how we got to the $20 a square foot value. In our view, that plus the escalations, without a lot of opportunity for deductions for unknown conditions, as Mike referred to, that will ultimately be found as projects go forward on the site. That to us feels like a big win, and is a really positive outcome from an economic standpoint for the port and for the community at large. I think overall this has been a really good process in creating the agreement, and look forward to any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. I just want to reiterate that Heartland was incredible to work with, especially early on in this process. We were kind of floundering as to how we were going to get this out to market, and they were great advice came from Heartland. So for your consideration, Commission, we are in Bellingham. We're not South Lake Union. I would consider the Seattle Bellevue markets to be a primary real estate market. Places like Everett, Tacoma are secondary, and we're in a tertiary market. Harcourt is going to have a Washington LLC. They'll have key persons that are intimately involved in the project. They have tremendous access to capital that we don't have, and they've demonstrated an understanding of our project, and they've shown they can do similar projects around the world. You do have alternatives to signing this master development agreement. One of them is we could go back out with an RFP, or we could go seek another master developer. I think if you went that route, we'd end up about where we are right now, just in a longer time frame. We could sell the parcel. We could sell the project parcel by parcel. So we could sell 2, 3, 5 acre chunks to different developers that wanted to do it. Or we could undertake the development ourselves, much like what we did on the Bellwether Peninsula. We got that going by building the parking garage and the first building. And we could do something similar here. Or we could do nothing and sit on the land. Our recommendation, staff's recommendation to you, is that we go forward with this master development agreement. We think it's the best deal we're going to get in the near future, and we think it meets everyone's interests and needs. So what are the next steps? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say that I've been on this commission 12 years. And if you think something's not going to be built there, I got news for you. We'll build a barn if we have to.
So Jim's going to have a work party, and we're going to put up a barn. So the next steps, we're going to ask you to have a special commission meeting on March 31st, 3 p.m. The documents today will be put up on the website, either by the end of business today or first thing tomorrow morning if there's technical difficulties, but we expect they'll be up there today for the public to review. We'd like you to come back with any questions in 2 weeks, commissioners, and talk about the document some more, but we're going to ask you to vote on it at that time. We're going to, during that time, and even after you either approve or don't approve the development agreement, we are going to be doing site preparation and cleanup work. We now have a permit to do the Whatcom Waterway, and that work will be going out for bid, and you will be awarding that bid sometime in May. The waterway cleanup will start in August. Phase 1 infrastructure will start to be installed by the city in 2016, and then construction of buildings can begin. And that concludes my presentation.
Rob, I was a little apprehensive in putting this out to the public without Harcourt signing it to begin with. But between our paranoid council, who guaranteed us they're 95 to 99% on board, we can certainly do it. Understand it's not signed, but I would expect them to sign it within the next 13 days so we can act on it after the public comment at our next meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. That's an important point. And the typical practice here at the port is that we bring you documents that have already been executed by the other party, so that then when you execute them, the agreement is binding and effective.
Commissioners, one thing to note is it's a national holiday in Ireland today, so they're not working.
We really wanted to bring you the final document today on St. Patrick's Day and have your approval of it, but I think it's important that both the public and you have another 2 weeks to review the master development agreement and pose any questions you have to us. And actually, if I can, I'd like to tell the public to please approach me with any questions you have over the next 2 weeks. You don't have to wait till the 31st. You're free to contact me at any time.
So, Rob, I actually have a few points to make. One of them is, and this has come up, I think I brought it up many times, is the city timelines, because I know we're partnering with the city on this as far as infrastructure development and that sort of thing. I also know what their budgets are right now for park infrastructure and roadway infrastructure. I would like to see within the next couple of weeks maybe some information from the city that shows that they've got a process in place to increase the budgets, because the money that they've got set aside for the granary portion of this, or the new Granary Street and part of the new Blowdell, unless they've changed their transportation improvement plan, I don't know if they've got the entire funding set aside already. So,
Tara Sundin is here from the city. She's just begging to have the microphone.
Now, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
The first connection, Granary, Blowdell over to Cornwall, is fully funded.
Okay.
Ooh, wow.
city. So we are waiting for this moment on the 31st,
Okay,
and then we
great.
can proceed.
So I know that some of the language that's been used has been calling it temporary or interim streets, like interim Laurel, et cetera. And several years ago, I started advocating for the connectivity to occur. But I would like at least people at the city to hear from me that I'm not advocating for complete streets in the term of complete streets, especially because it's a construction project. But I think making sure that we do have the connectivity with a real legitimate street is really important to do. So it's good to see that that's funded. Where's the city at on the park funding right now, especially along the waterway?
The park funding, we are not fully funded on that. We plan to take that project down in phases and deliver that. We need to coordinate with Harcourt because we don't want to deliver a park right there, right now, ahead of activity and uses. So, and we've got, per our interlocal, we have about a year longer to deliver that park component than Greenery Blowdell.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
So for me, I believe this agreement's really establishing our starting point. We're talking about two buildings or two projects right now, and we're tying the owners of this foreign company to them, which I think should provide some assurance to people that this isn't just a get rich quick scheme. There's been a lot of conversation about the length of time on this, and I think a lot of folks had this idea because you see drawings prepared, and these go back a decade, of what something could look like on our waterfront. And what I came to understand when I was in graduate school about how cities grow is I put it in my mind that they're bonsai projects. So what Fairhaven looked like when it was settled 100 plus years ago is certainly not what it looks like today, and cities just never do stop growing unless they disappear, which is pretty rare. So to me, I'm not really worried about what the future holds here, because there is a lot that will change as the markets change, as our economy shifts, as businesses come and go or succeed and fail. But the starting point to me is super critical, because I think it lays out the groundwork for what happens next. And as we move forward, this concept of an urban village, which is probably a little bit different of what's going to actually be built from what we might think is an urban village, I think that it's important to think of that being an enhancement of the downtown, not a separate issue. And one of my criticisms of the conversation that had been had about this particular project over the years was using language like getting people in and out or down and back, as opposed as if it was some sort of separate thing like it used to be when it was with Georgia Pacific and private. Sustainability and resilience are extremely important to me, and Matt Petrini was here and he was talking about this a bit in his public comment. There's a lot of folks worried about sea level rise. I think we have some numbers about what that might be in the future. I don't think it's threatening to this particular project as far as we can tell. But resilience isn't just about accommodating sea level rise. It's also accommodating shifting economies if we run out of natural gas or something terrible happens, and how this project can survive into the future and still make money for the owners, because we certainly don't want something that fails. One of the things that I've been talking about since 2009 is my clean tech campus concept, and I would strongly encourage the folks at Harcourt, as they go out and look for potential tenants, to take a good hard look at this business sector. If we look at Robin, I think you've heard me say this before. If we look at Silicon Valley or even the Research Triangle out in North Carolina, or many other places that are similar, they're not small. They're geographically quite extensive. And when I think of a clean tech business locating here, it's the small sort of startup company that otherwise might not locate in lower Puget Sound around Seattle, like South Lake Union, where the prices are significantly higher, but still want to be close to that, just an hour and a half away, even when the traffic's not that great. So I would really, really encourage the folks at Harcourt to take a good hard look at this in the next steps. Probably not these first two phases, but I'd certainly encourage them to start now if they want to. I really want to make sure, it was the reason I ran for this office in the first place, I really want to make sure that Harcourt's efforts have a meaningful impact on our county for no other reason than to justify a previous commission's desire to make this a public endeavor. You can criticize whether the public should have been involved in this or not, but that's really water under the bridge, because we are. But Harcourt has got to be successful, and that means they have to make money. But it's also a publicly owned piece of land, and this is a public project. So the public has to get something more than just a bunch of new buildings, because otherwise there was no point in the public owning it. The private sector could have developed it on their own and done just fine. So I'm honestly excited about this stage. This is the part that I've been waiting for since I got here. I know that Jim's been waiting for this for twice as long as I have. But this is where I think we set the tone and establish what the next steps are going to be. And I think this is a really, really good start. So I'm pretty dang excited about this and looking forward to seeing the signature from Harcourt in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Jim?
Well, I just want to comment on one thing that Mike made a point of, and that was to get this project on going. And once we get it on the road, and we need to keep the speed limit at a higher rate than it's been for the last many years. And I think that from everything we're hearing, sounds like a very good agreement, and it certainly has the possibilities of getting something happening soon. And I think that is really a key element, is the speed of moving along.
I would also echo that the dates that we set that things have to happen or else are way out there. I think it's going to happen much quicker. I think once the anchor tenant is in, I really think Harcourt's going to go a lot faster than what we've shown you today, and I'm excited about it as well, and do hope this is signed within the next 13 days.
Thank you. I think Matt Anderson alluded to it earlier that the interests are aligned here. So I think you're right, Commissioner Robinson. I think the pace of development will go faster because everyone's interests are to have it go faster. So thank you for your time.
Commissioners, I would just say that one of the things Harcourt told us is I think that the port has a reputation of being a good business partner with people once the port gets into business with them. And I think Rob Fix said to Harcourt, we hope you make a lot of money. I mean, we're not trying to take your profit. We want you to come here and perform and be wildly successful, because that will mean that the port's wildly successful.
But, you know, Frank, I thank you for bringing that up, because as a builder myself and working for a company that's when we use the word quality, it means something, and we know that quality gets us, and our last job gets us our next job. But this type of development, quality will find other quality seeking it. So that's why, like I said, these first two steps, you know, we get two great projects out the gate, and you know, the granary building to me is such a no-brainer because it's got that ground floor connectivity that so few buildings in this county actually have, where you can have Central Street becoming that new promenade that just doesn't exist in this county. I don't think. Maybe a little bit up in Blaine there, but that public presence right there, and I think the citizens of Whatcom County, especially Bellingham, have proven that we use our waterfront, and the coffee shop over in Boulevard Park. Classic example. I know a lot of people were unhappy about having a private business in a public park, but I got to tell you, that park is busier than it ever was. And I think that with the granary building coming online, as the first thing, I think the people that live right here are going to prove that it'll be successful, and of course other people will come. So.
Any other comments from anyone on the Master Development Agreement? Hearing none, we'll move on to our next item, which is a public hearing. So we'll recess the public meeting and open the public hearing on the Bellingham Municipal Code. Or do you want to read this, Diane? Or
Let's see. I'm sorry, just one moment. I would just reiterate, we're recessing the public meeting to open the public hearing on the Bellingham Municipal Code, Chapter 12.08. Frank?
There is a port statute that allows ports to ask counties or cities, wherever they're located, to adopt port regulations as part of the municipal code or the county code, in which case they become criminal offenses. Back in the 80s, before my time even, early 80s, somebody, the city of Bellingham adopted the port's harbor rules and regulations as a municipal code. And when looked at today, you think, well, some of this is kind of quaint. For example, you'll keep your boat tied up correctly, and you won't have too loud of parties, and you'll pay your moorage on time, and you'll give us 14 days notice before you leave the harbor. And the result of that was that this was in the city code. Well, along comes a push to upgrade the boathouse electrical systems that are there, which are done by a city electrical permit. And like houses and cars and campers, boats have gotten bigger and bigger, and our harbor's filled with service that's in excess of 20 amperes, 30 amperes, 40, maybe even 50, I don't know, but for bigger boats. So Boathouse comes along and says, boy, we would like to rewire our boathouse and upgrade our electrical system to handle these 30 amps. And someone found this old code, and it has some ambiguous language that says the port will provide 20 amps of service. And that was viewed by the port and the city as an impediment to allowing this electrical upgrade. And the city graciously agreed to repeal this ordinance. And we wanted to fast track it because literally right now they're out there pulling wire on this project. But the statute also requires that you have a public hearing before you request, before the ordinance is passed, withdrawing the city, the criminal sanctions attached to the port's regulations. I might tell you as kind of background, Dan Stahl's up in Alaska, but he couldn't see any of these regulations that he wanted to be criminal. And he said, as far as he can remember, anybody at the port, the Bellingham police have never come down and enforced any of the port's regulations. Likewise, at the city, they couldn't recall ever participating in it as well. So they've had their first reading. They're going to have their second reading next Monday, and this will comply with the legal requirements kind of on a fast track basis, so this can be done quickly to meet the customer's needs down at the marina. And that's what this is about. So you have to have a public hearing. If anybody objects to it, they can step up and tell you that.
Okay, and now's the time for anyone to step up and tell us that.
We have one non-staff person here. Okay.
Hearing no one, I guess we close the public hearing and we reconvene the public meeting.
That's correct, Commissioners. Thank you. And then you're going to affirm the resolution you already passed that the city agreed to act on until we can get, while we get this scheduled.
That would be our first action item under planning and development. And Diane, if you could please read that.
Yes, a motion to reaffirm Resolution Number 1339 of the Board of Commissioners of the Port of Bellingham requesting the City of Bellingham repeal or substantially modify Bellingham Municipal Code BMC Chapter 12.08 entitled Bellingham Harbor.
Thank you very much, Diane. Commissioners, any comments?
No comments.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 3-0. Thank you. Our next item, the action item is under environmental. Diane, if you could please read that.
A motion authorizing the Executive Director to enter into a professional services agreement with Bennett Engineering LLC to perform landfill monitoring and permitting support services for an estimated cost of $37,531 plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized budget of $41,285.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This professional services agreement with Bennett Engineering pertains to our ongoing monitoring at the Airport Woodways landfill, which was acquired by the port with the Georgia Pacific property transaction. It's a landfill that's been closed since 1992 and has a post-closure plan which is under the Whatcom County Health Department that requires the port to do ongoing monitoring, groundwater monitoring, monthly inspections of the cover to maintain that it's performing as designed. It also has an on-site leachate management system where the leachate that's generated from the landfill is treated and then discharged to surface water. So this is a professional professional services agreement to continue our ongoing obligations under those permits. We did, Bennett Engineering has been providing consulting services for the port for a while. This year we did go out for a request for professional services just to make sure that we were continuing with the most qualified firm. 3 firms responded, and the evaluation team did decide that Bennett Engineering was continuing to be the most qualified for this. The other component of this, a little bit of change in scope of services. This year also will require the renewal of the NPDES discharge permit. So there's a reapplication process with the Department of Ecology on that. Although that takes some upfront work, I do believe that this renewal will reduce our monitoring requirements significantly. So we have a number of years of data under this first permit. Now that we'll renegotiate and reapply for the new permit, and I think I anticipate that our monitoring costs for the next few years will go down significantly after that. This is a PSA that's just for this year. We do anticipate multiple amendments on an annual basis, so we've set that up in the request for professional services, and would anticipate that we'll bring back to the Commission for consideration on an annual basis for renewal under this PSA. It is funded 50% by our AIG grant, insurance policy. This, unlike the Matka cleanups, is not a remedial action grant funded part. So the remaining 50% of this comes out of our port environmental operating budget. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Brian, so was their contract up this year? Is that why the RFPS was sent out?
Yeah, similar to this case, we set it up on an annual basis with regular renewals, but with this new scope, as well as it had been about 5 years since we'd actually gone out for requests for professional services, we thought it was an appropriate time to see if there were other firms that were more qualified.
Is there any reason not to save some time and just give them a 2 or 3 year contract now?
We've explored that, but with part of this is because it's an ongoing multiple year contract or requirement. It hinges on the commission budget approval. So we've just set it up to have almost an annual renewal of the contract, and that way we also can scope it appropriately, and as things change, we can manage that. There've been a few times where we've reduced our scope, so we've actually used budget that was existing and approved, and not had to, and moved into another task, and not had to come back annually. But it's kind of an adaptive management of the PSA that way.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, did you have anything?
No.
So we're going to spend $40,000 monitoring wood rotting.
Yep.
Simple
Time-consuming.
terms. Actually, we're going to do a little more than that. It looks like we're going to monitor it monthly, inspect it, look at the gases coming off there, and take samples and take them to a lab.
Right. Yeah, we had anticipated potentially using the leachate management system and pumping it to the sanitary sewer, and we would have avoided all these costs. But over a 50-year period and the escalating costs associated with that project, we did do an analysis and anticipate that this would be a cheaper alternative to do it this way.
$2 million over 2 million bucks over 50 years. Is that right?
I have to go back and look at it, but it was a significant reduction. Yeah.
Feel good about that.
You know, if we could give it away for compost, but probably the shipping cost would be too high. So.
Yeah.
Okay. And no other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Brian. Our next action item in facilities.
Approve an increase of $40,000 to the authorized contract amount for the contract with Strider Construction Company for the Multiple Utility Improvement Project 2014 for a total authorized amount of $1,009,234.19, and increase the budget by $40,000 for CIP number 107-464-1900, the FMIP Waterline Replacement Project.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm John Hergesheimer, Senior Project Engineer for the Port on this project, and I'm here before you for the second time on this project. Back in December, I had requested some additional funding to complete this, hopefully complete this project, and we were close to doing that, but we had more excavation to do down on the FMIP site. As you may recall, it's an old industrial site built on fill over many years, and the bottom line is we run into more fortunately not contamination, but more obstructions and piping locations that were not known on any plan. And so that has caused us to do alternate routes for installing the sprinkler system, feed lines for the buildings, and to put the main line in to go around some obstructions. And all that then means more cost for excavation, more cost for backfill, and also cost for pavement. And as you are probably all well aware, the pavement down there is not in great shape. So any time you deal with pavement like that, you end up increasing, the trench gets wider because of the pavement condition. But all those now have been corrected, and the system has been installed. The system has been tested and approved by the fire department. We have the final public works inspection on Thursday. And so this final amount here is requested for completing the last of the work that Strider needs to be paid for this project, and this will complete the project.
Does that water have a little gold or something in it? I mean,
Didn't find any gold. There might be other metals in there, but not gold.
This is an additional $40,000 on a water line, on just the water line there at the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park that broke.
It's a replacement of the entire water system in the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park. So
it's just not there where Seaview had it. It's more than.
That's correct, Commissioner. The break that happened when the water main broke, that created quite a blowout area. But this project, this is the Phase 2 project. The Phase 2 project completely replaced all the water system in FMIP, clear from the city property line all the way through the site.
So all those lines have been dug up?
All the existing lines have been abandoned in place. The new lines have gone in to take their place. All 7 buildings have been connected with their new sprinkler systems. A new potable water system has been installed, including the pressure reducer valves and the backflow preventers for both the potable and the fire systems. And the disconnection has occurred there from the city system in some areas where that needed to be done. So it's entirely new system, as well as all the old system, all the surface features have been removed. So in that way, it's a clean site. All the hydrants, all the old vaults have been taken down below ground, paved over, and the site cleaned up.
So Strider's already done the work. They're trusting we're going to say yes to this $40,000.
That's correct.
Boy, those guys are brave.
Well, this is done on a change order proposal basis, and so they submit the costs and the time it takes to go through the approvals.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was wondering, because typically I wouldn't do a change order for somebody unless they paid for it up front. In this case, though, it doesn't really work that way because our meetings don't really occur in a convenient time for the work to be done.
That's correct.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do have one question that might pertain to not specifically this project, but it is FMIP. The last time I was down there, it was pretty high tide, and water on the south side is really encroaching up into the lot down there. Are we going to have to be looking at making some additional investments into FMIP in the future?
Well, that's really going to be a question for the real estate division and you commissioners on what to do about that situation. It is very low at a moderately high tide. Even there is some flooding. At an extreme high tide, there's quite a bit of flooding onto the Seaview site, and even onto the road in front of the Seaview site. When we were building this project, the contractor was prevented from doing some work because literally the tide was over the top of the trench, coming from Padden Creek over the pavement into the trench.
So other than a real estate problem, do you see any sort of engineering problems right now with this, with the water encroachment from the tides?
It's really hard to say. That's been happening for so long. I think any settlement occurring from the site getting flooded with salt water or fresh water and then draining down and coming back, it's been occurring for so many years. I think everything that was going to settle has probably settled. The last fix that we did when the area in the Seaview boatyard area was had that water leak, and it blew out a lot of gravel. That has been completely replaced with 2 feet of new material on top of fabric, and then pavement on top of that. So that's all been completely redone, but at the same elevation.
Okay.
Right.
Bring up a good point, Mike. Other than the outside parking lot or boat storage area for Seaview, the inner buildings don't flood at all at high tide, do they?
No, that's correct. It's only the edge along Patton Creek.
And that's the lowest point there.
That's a low point, yes.
I think one of Seaview's employees mentioned that he recalled a tide, and this was probably a month ago, so it was 2 months back, that there was a tide that nearly got into what they call their carpentry shop. I don't quite know what that building is, but he said they were watching the water get right up into that. Or not in it, but right up close to it. So.
An extreme high tide in a storm, extreme low pressure storm event and extreme high tide combination, and a lot of water coming down Patton Creek will create a flood tide of that kind of magnitude where it gets pretty close to the door of that building number 4.
Okay.
But it hasn't gone in yet, to my knowledge.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Any comments, Jim? No. Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. John passes 3-0. The next item on the action item, Diane?
Authorize the
Don,
executive.
before you leave, just supply the tenants with hip boots. Go ahead, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Authorize the executive director to execute an interlocal agreement with the city of Bellingham to install fencing made necessary by the construction of the interim public trail connecting the Bellwether Peninsula to the Temporary Aeration Stabilization Basin, or the ASB trail.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Adam Fulton. I'm a senior project engineer here at the Port of Bellingham. This is the ASB trail that you have seen, just to orient everyone. This is the I&J Street waterway being shown, and Hilton Avenue is the road of subject there. And Rotor is out to the right of the screen, traveling up and down the screen. North is essentially up. So this trail the Commission has seen connects the Bellwether development on out to the ASB trail. The ASB breakwater. And the ASB breakwater trail actually proceeds further out the breakwater and then turns the corner and then it stops. The only reason that's not shown here is because this is the city's project and their work stops at the fence line prior to going out into the ASB. The reason we're here today is we have developed an interlocal with the city for them to install a fence for us. Just to zoom in on that area in red, this is Hawley's Marina shown here. Get rid of this. This is Hawley's Marina here, and Cow Beach is this, and the trail would be out here. So the point of that fence is essentially to provide security to our tenant, Hawley's Marina. The reason we do the interlocal is because it's just an efficient hire for them to simply add it to their project and us to reimburse them, rather than us going out to a separate bid for such a small contract. That is the end of the presentation. Do the commissioners have any questions?
You have any questions, Mike? Jim? Hilton Harbor Marina, is it Hilton Harbor or is it Hawley's now? Still both. I found it really interesting when I went down and met with Jesse when he wanted to extend his lease there at Hilton Harbor. And he was telling me how the former tenant didn't want a trail through his property or any of that. And Jesse says, I want the trail through my property. I want the public to see I store boats here and store their boat here. So I really like this new young man that owns that business. And that's going to be a nice trail, as long as the wind isn't blowing too hard when you're out there.
You got that right.
The chin straps.
Tenant, by the way, I'm told is called Bitter Boats, and that was the gentleman that was here earlier.
Bitter End Boats. Adam,
That's
do you
right,
know what
Bitter
the
End
bitter
Boats.
end is? What's the bitter end? What's it stand for? Do you know?
You know, I'm a phrase origin person, and I don't know that one.
Commissioner?
I do believe it's got something to do with the end of a line.
Very
Well,
good.
of course it's that.
What's the bitter
The
end?
bit and
Bitter end boats. Bitter end.
I give.
That's the end of the line that hooks to the anchor, the bitter end when you throw it overboard. But anyway,
well, I do have one quick question, Adam. This only goes up to the ASB. This is not for any work up on the ASB. The improvements that are needed there, right?
So, yeah, a little bit of confusion there is the city's project ends at the ASB, but the trail itself, for which they've acquired a license from us in this commission maybe 3 months ago, goes out on the ASB and nearly rounds the corner, or actually rounds the first corner, but doesn't go out to the very end, the bitter end. But their project doesn't have any work on the ASB trail, so it's not shown on this drawing.
when will the bitter end of this trail be completed, Adam?
Sorry, I meant to mention that. They anticipate or would like to have this, this trail open to the public July 1st.
Of this year?
Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
We should, and I'm just going to make an effort to do so, continue to point out that this is a dead end because of the problem with the harbor line. This has not changed, correct?
You're correct.
You'll be able to walk in from the northwest side of the ASB, walk a half a mile around, come to a 10-foot tall electrified wired fence with razor wire on top of it, and a shark in the water to keep you from skipping around it because we are having an issue with the Department of Natural Resources letting us use this road for a trail. But other than that, we'll have a trail going somewhere.
Out to a nice vantage point.
Okay.
It'll take care of animals. That yeah.
Any other comments, gentlemen?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Dan, for letting me be snarky for a moment there.
Passes 3-0. The next item, please, Diane.
Authorize the executive director to execute a professional services agreement with Carletti Architects to provide design and consulting services for the 207 Harris Avenue building improvement project in the amount of $30,183 plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized amount of $33,000.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm still Adam Fulton, and I'm still a project engineer here at the Port. This is the Airwhack building. We are trying to refer to our buildings by their address, as this is more transcendental to time. So this is the 207 Harris building, shown in the red dashed box there. You might know it also as the Airwhack building. Little history on the building is that it burned down in 1992, and the Port was able to replace it by an insurance claim in 1993. This, to my knowledge, is the first time we have done significant maintenance to the building in the form of a new roof, a paint job, and relocating the backflow prevention system. As you can see from the photo in the upper right, the building is ready to receive these improvements. They're on time, they're timely, it's good money spent for the building. The backflow prevention is actually a requirement of the city of Bellingham in response to the Washington State Department of Health, and that is that we correctly isolate the property from backflow prevention to the city's water system by means of a backflow preventer. It's called premise protection, and in other words, you can't have a contamination capability directly linked to the city's water system. You have to go through a backflow prevention before you start tapping the line. That is not our situation today. It will be when we're done. Do the commissioners have any questions?
I have none. Okay. No comments either, gentlemen? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you very much, Adam. Well, that's it of the action items. Does anyone have any new business?
I'm done today.
25 minutes worth? No.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Hearing none, I move the meeting be adjourned.
Good meeting, gentlemen. Thank you.
Before